So I'm continuing on reading a few older works that have found their way into public domain. Today's focus is going to be on some letters Gerard Manley Hopkins has printed up in the Norton anthology, The Modern. It's a very nice book. If you're a poet, it's a must-have. This goes over several things that Gerard Manley Hopkins held deep to his heart. I thought it was interesting to see it in letter form, to see how lovingly rendered ideas were between people who really cared about their arts. Dedicating this reading, although it's not my work, I'm dedicating the reading aspect of it to my new friend Edward Ferrari, who will absolutely hate me for dedicating this reading to him. But thanks for the chat the other day on Poetics, and this is me firing back about Gerard Manley Hopkins being a fiddling old twat. Love you, Ed. Gerard Manley Hopkins, sprung rhythm. From St. Buenos, St. SF, August 21st, 1877. Dearest Robert Bridges, why do I employ sprung rhythm at all? Because it is the nearest to the rhythm of prose, that is, the native and natural rhythm of speech, the least forced, the most rhetorical and emphatic of all possible rhythms, combining, as it seems to me, opposite and one would have thought incompatible excellences, markednesses of rhythm, that is, rhythm's self, and naturalness of expression. For why, if it is forcible in prose to say lashed rod, am I obliged to weaken this in verse, which ought to be stronger, not weaker, into lashed birch rod or something? My verse is less to be read than heard, as I have told you before. It is oratorical, that is, the rhythm is so. I think if you will study what I have here said, you will be much more pleased with it, and may I say, converted to it. You ask, may you call it presumptuous jugglery? No, but only for this reason, that presumptuous is not English. I cannot think of altering anything. Why should I? I do not write for the public. You are my public, and I hope to convert you. You said you would not for any money read my poem again. Nevertheless, I beg you will. Besides money, you know, there is love. If it is obscure, do not bother yourself with the meaning, but pay attention to the best and most intelligible stanzas, as the last of each part in the narrative of the wreck. If you had done this, you would have liked it better and sent me some serviceable criticisms. But now your criticism was of no use, being only a protest memorializing me against my whole policy and its proceedings. I may add, for your greater interest and edification, that what refers to myself in the poem is all strictly and literally true, and did all occur. Nothing is added for poetical padding. Sprung Rhythm, basically a part 2. 101st Mount Street, Grosvenor Square, West, October 5th, 1878. To Richard Watson Dixon. You ask, do I write verse myself? What I had written I burnt before I became a Jesuit, and resolved to write no more, as not belonging to my profession, unless it were by the wish of my superiors. So for 7 years I wrote nothing but 2 or 3 little presentation pieces, which occasion called for. But when in the winter of 75 the Deutschland was wrecked in the mouth of the Thames, and 5 Franciscan nuns, exiled for Germany by the Falk laws, aboard of her were drowned, I was affected by the account, and happening to say so to my rector, he said that he wished someone would write a poem on the subject. On this hint I set to work, and, though my hand was out at first, produced one. I had long had haunting my ear the echo of a new rhythm, which now I realized on paper. To speak shortly, it consists in the scanning by accents or stresses alone, without any account of the number of syllables, so that a foot may be but one strong syllable, or it may be many, light and one strong. I'd not say the idea is altogether new. There were hints of it in music, in nursery rhymes and popular jingles, in the poets themselves, and since then I have seen it talked about as a thing possible in critics. Here are instances. Ding dong bell, pussy's in the well. Who put her in? Little Johnny Thin. Who pulled her out? Little Johnny Stout. For if each line has 3 stresses or 3 feet, it follows that some of the feet are of 1 syllable only. So too, 1, 2, buckle my shoe. That's in. In Campbell, you have, and their fleet along the deep proudly shone. It was 10 of April morn by the chime, etc. In Shakespeare, why should this desert be? Corrected wrongly by the editors in more, a little melody I cannot quote, etc. But no one has professedly used it and made of it a principle throughout that I know of. Nevertheless, to me it appears, I own, to be a better and more natural principle than the ordinary system, much more flexible, and capable of much greater effects. However, I had to mark the stresses in blue chalk, and this in my rhymes carried on from one line into another, and certain chimes suggested by the Welsh poetry I had been reading, what they call, Klangenot, really cool form, as editors aside, sorry. And a great many more oddnesses could not but dismay an editor's eye, so that when I offered it to our magazine, The Month, though at first they accepted it, after a time they withdrew and dared not print it. After writing this, I held myself free to compose, but could not find it in my consciousness to spend time upon it, so I have done little and shall do less. But I wrote a shorter piece on the Eurydice, also in sprung rhythm, as I call it, but simpler, shorter, and without marks, and offered the Month that too. But they did not like it either. Also I have written some sonnets, and a few other little things, some in sprung rhythm, with various other experiments as outriding feet, that is, parts of which do not count in the scanning, such as you find in Shakespeare's later plays, but as a license, whereas mine are rather calculated effects. Others, in the ordinary scanning, counterpointed. This is counterpoint, home to his mother's house, private, returned, and but to vanquish by wisdom hellish wiles, etc. Others, 1 or 2, in common, uncounterpointed rhythm. But even the impulse to write is wanting, for I have no thought of publishing. I should add that Milton is the great standard in the use of counterpoint. In Paradise Lost and Regained, in the last more freely, it is being an advance in his art. He employs counterpoint more or less everywhere, markedly now and then, but the choruses of Samson Agonistes, pardon me if I pronounce that wrong, are, in my judgment, counterpointed throughout. That is, each line, or nearly so, has 2 different coexistent scansions. But when you reach that point, the secondary or mounted rhythm, which is necessarily a sprung rhythm, overpowers the original or conventional one, and then this becomes superfluous and may be got rid of by taking that last step that you reach simple sprung rhythm with. Milton must have known this, but had reasons for not taking it. Next letter. My poetry errs on the size of oddness. St. Giles, Oxford, February 15th, 1879. Dearest Robert Bridges, no doubt my poetry errs on the side of oddness. I hope in time to have a more balanced and Miltonic style, but as air, melody is what strikes me most of all in music and design and painting. So design, pattern, or what that I am in the habit of calling inscape is what I above all aim at in poetry. Now is the virtue of design, pattern, or inscape to be distinctive, and is the vice of distinctiveness to become queer. This vice I cannot have escaped. However, winding the eyes is queer only if looked at from the wrong point of view. Look at it as a motion in and of the eyeballs. It is what you say, but I mean that the eye winds. Only in the sense that its focus or point of sight winds, and that coincides with the point of the object and winds with that. for the object, a lantern, passing further and further away and bearing now east, now west of one right line, is truly and properly described as winding. That is how it should be taken then. Yeah, so if you replace wind with wind, that whole last section will make total sense. But I err on the side of oddness. The current language heightened. Last letter. August 14th, 1879. My dearest Robert Bridges, by the by, inversions, as you say, I do avoid them, because they weaken and because they destroy the earnestness or in-earnestness of the utterance. Nevertheless, in prose, I use them more than other people, because there they have great advantages of another sort. Now these advantages they should have in verse too, but they must not seem to be due to the verse. That is what is so enfeebling. For instance, the finest of your sonnets, to my mind, has line enfeebled by inversion, plainly due to the verse. As I said once before, 'tis joy the falling of her fold to view. But how it should be mended I do not see. As it is, I feel my way to their use. However, in a nearly finished piece I have a very bold one indeed. So also I cut myself off from the use of ere, or, well nigh, what time, say not, for do not say, because, though dignified, they neither belong to nor ever could arise from or be the elevation of ordinary modern speech. For it seems to me that the poetical language of an age should be the current language heightened to any degree heightened and unlike itself, but not, I mean normally, passing freaks and graces are another thing, an obsolete one. This is Shakespeare and Milton's practice, and the want of it will be fatal to Tennyson's Idylls and Plays, to Swinburne, and perhaps to Morris. May we all have incredible conversations like this, preferably not one-sided. Poor Robert, who knows how nice his letters were to the great Gerard Manley Hopkins. But get out there and rock your poetry, peeps. That's coming from the heart. We got a lot of work to do, people. Poetry is blooming. Let's talk, let's get together, let's be in coffee houses together, let's read together, let's read our works on YouTube. Let's bring poetry home to the masses and to the people and back into the hearts of everyday folk. Namaste.